One question that I've been pondering about the new Yamaha R9 is it a real Supersport? This is something I'm seeing a lot online where people say, oh, it doesn't have a screaming inline 4-cylinder engine, they made it fat, they made it soft. This isn't a real Supersport bike. But I don't really think that's the case. By definition, a Supersport machine is a bike that the manufacturer is homologating for race use, right? We've typically seen in the past the 600 category, this bike's predecessor, the R6. It was a bike that was race ready, homologated for use because it went racing in World Supersport. Well, as it turns out, the Yamaha R9 made its debut this year, and at the hands of Stefano Manzi in World Supersport at Phillip Island, it took its first win on its debut. So not only is it a race platform, it's got race pedigree too, which is pretty sweet. It's a motorcycle that obviously has the ability to win races. So not only is it a Supersport by that metric, it's a Supersport by the fact that it is winning. It's also made by a company, you might have heard of them, the tuning fork company called Yamaha, and they've got decades and decades of race pedigree. So that kind of checks that box. The other box that people say is, well, it doesn't rev super high, and it's got a naked bike engine. Okay, I'll give you that. This motorcycle doesn't have sky-high revs. It delivers its power in a very different way. But do you know what other Supersport motorcycles are big in displacement and deliver their power in a slightly different way? The old Panigale twins from Ducati, right? Those are platforms that have big, burly twins, and they don't really rev out that high. Now granted, the last generation Panigale did make 155 horsepower, but prior to that, they made somewhere to the tune of, 120, 130 horsepower and, 60 to 70 foot-pounds of torque. This bike makes 117 horsepower and 69 foot-pounds of torque, so it's kind of in the ballpark of Supersport power and delivery if you don't think about the fact that it needs to be a 16,000 RPM screamer like a Yamaha R6. I think this motorcycle delivers a really nice amount of punch. Now, the idea that it's a naked bike engine, that is true. This is completely lifted from the MT-09. It's virtually unchanged except for a couple ECU settings, and the gearing in the back's a little longer to accommodate higher Supersport speeds, right? So that's the only way that this thing is really different from the MT-09. Now that's pretty different from, for example, the R1 and MT-10 platforms. They both use a cross-plane 4-cylinder, but the R1 is still more special. It revs out more, it makes way more peak power, it's just set up totally differently. That is one thing I kind of wish that Yamaha did on this platform. I kind of wish that they set it up with a bit of a higher rev ceiling from factory and a little more top-end punch. Given that the new generation Supersport rules don't really have to comply with much of anything, I kind of wish that Yamaha had dropped some hotter cams and made this motorcycle rev out a little bit more from the factory. You saw Triumph do this with their Daytona 660 and Trident 660 platforms. They made the Daytona 660 rev out a little bit more than the Trident 660, which gives it more of a sporty flavor. Now, I do want to say that the Daytona 660, I don't think is a real Supersport at all, because the other point I want to talk about is the energy of a bike. Supersport-styled motorcycles give a very distinct feeling when you ride them. The combination of ergonomics, look out of the cockpit, and the feeling of wanting to go fast and just go full tuck, a nice flat gas tank, they all elicit a very specific Supersport feeling. I've ridden and owned many Supersport bikes. I have a Track Prep Daytona. We've done R1s, BMW S1000 RRs, ZX6s, R6s. We've done a lot of different bikes here on the channel that have real deal Supersport energy. And I gotta say, the R9 with the clip-ons being underneath the triple tree here, the ergonomics being very aggressive and sporty, the kind of windshield fairings right here flaring out towards you, the peripheral vision to me gives that real deal Supersport energy, and I really like it. It gives me that vibe that this is a serious motorcycle. The other thing I'm seeing a lot online is people pointing to the fact that, yes, it is aggressively styled and aggressive in its ergonomics, but this is a softer bike than the R6, and that makes it not a real super sport. And to that, I kind of scratch my head, because I think, well, in the early 2000s, before, you know, super sports and super bikes became these like super razor sharp, crazy ass machines, you know, a lot of bikes were more comfortable to ride. Having a bike be more comfortable to ride doesn't necessarily mean it's not that sporty or sporting in its nature. Look back to the old Fireblades from the 90s, right? Those are lauded by old heads as, you know, very comfortable, very nice machines to get along with and live with. And that was actually Honda's whole MO with those motorcycles, was to build something that had the street-going capability, right? And truthfully, if you've ridden an R9 and you've spent any amount of time on a real 600, you'll know that the difference in comfort is maybe like 10 to 15% at most. This is not some ultra comfy touring bike. This is still a proper sport bike. It comes equipped with fully adjustable suspension front and rear, and a very stiff chassis, and a pretty aggressive ergonomic setup. I don't really find this motorcycle that comfortable over a traditional R6. In speaking more about the Supersport energy, the first thing I felt when I got on this motorcycle was, oh man, it's kind of like, you know, a very numb feeling 3-cylinder sport bike thing that Yamaha is making. I don't know how to feel about this. It didn't feel super razor sharp. But then I flicked it over on the side of the tire into a corner, and it gives you that really proper super sport feeling. That's the big thing about sport bikes, is when you're cornering with them, which is the thing they're basically designed to do all the time, they have to give you that special super sport feeling that no other bike can give you. Like, yes, naked bikes are pretty much as capable as sport bikes on road nowadays. Like, you look at the MT-09 versus the R9, and it's basically the same thing in terms of its capability on road. But there's such a difference in the way you're positioned and how you, like, put your body over the front end of the machine, and like you manage that front contact patch, and you flick it into corners, you get your head low down near the mirror, and all of the puzzle pieces fit for this motorcycle. The only thing is that when you turn the gas, you just expect a bit more revs. But the good thing is, you know, many sport bike lovers and aficionados are happy to modify their machine. And I think that's definitely part and parcel of the Supersport experience. I don't think anybody's expecting to buy a brand new sport bike and have it be just perfect out of the box. You have to buy these things and, you know, usually adjust them or change them or modify them in some way. Sometimes it's master cylinders, sometimes it's tires, sometimes it's a flash, sometimes it's an exhaust. And in the case of the R9, it's all the things I just mentioned. But having the ability to increase the rev ceiling a little bit through the ECU primarily is a great thing. I think tuners are able to get this machine up to right about 11,500 RPM, and that's going to make it feel a whole lot better to just have that little bit of extra rev ceiling, eliminate that dead spot in second gear, make it feel like the powerful, potent, nimble bike that it is. All right, so the kind of squid elephant in the room that I think one of the big reasons people are talking about this machine, in the sense that it's not a real super sport, quote unquote, is they'll say, well, what's the top speed on that thing? How fast can I even go with the bike that makes 117 horsepower, blah, blah, blah. And although I do think this is a relatively unintelligent way to enjoy motorcycling, it's usually the least of my concern is the top speed of a machine. But the R9 has the Supersport energy in the sense that when you are on the highway, because it delivers power so effectively and so broadly across the rev range, it ends up feeling like a very fast motorcycle. This bike is extremely punchy from the kind of like 60 to 110 range. You can be in 5th or 4th gear and you can pin the throttle and you'll pretty much hit 90 or 100 in a matter of moments, you know, just seconds. You don't have to wait for the power, you don't have to wait to do anything, there's no theater, it just freaking gets up and goes. And that's what a lot of people want from their sport bikes. They want the ability to get on the highway and boogie a little bit. And the R9 can definitely do that. I don't know what the top speed of this machine is. It's probably somewhere in the 140-ish ballpark, bone stock. But I can guarantee you that with, you know, ECU tuning and exhaust, maybe changing the gearing a little bit, this bike will do every bit of, you know, about 155, maybe 160 miles an hour in stock configuration, without serious modifications to power, aerodynamics, or whatever else if you're trying to achieve big top speed runs. Now, you're not going to clip a $190, a $195 like you might with the leader bike, but I'll tell you, as a guy that's done those speeds a handful of times, it really becomes irrelevant. And one of the really cool things about the R9 is that it just has that nice, powerful feeling in the middle of the rev range that a leader bike does, for example. You know, one of the big reasons people upgrade from 600s to 1000s is because they want to feel that power more often than not. And the R9 certainly feels fast everywhere, as opposed to the R6 that only felt fast in one very specific part of the rev range. Of course, I would be remiss not to mention that this motorcycle is a giveaway bike on my website, yamadube.co. If you made it all the way to the end part of the video here, you're certainly a big fan of the channel, and I do appreciate it. If you want to support the show in an even further way, join as a member. You get access to our Discord server. Your dollars directly go to support the content that we make here. We're a small team. We're not a big corporate entity. We're just a bunch of guys who really love motorcycles and telling great stories about bikes and are very interested in changing that media landscape with motorcycling. So if you love what we do here, we make daily content to support the show. Head over to yamadube.co. Our way of saying thanks is getting you the opportunity to win these fantastic giveaway motorcycles. I've done 67 different bikes over the last 5.5 years. No plans on slowing down. It's a ton of fun. I love what I do here, and that's my little pitch. Thank you very much. It is a bummer when we get stuck behind a construction vehicle for the entirety of our fun twisty road section, boys, but them's the breaks. Sometimes that's life. So yeah, man, the concerns that the R9 isn't a real sport bike or it's not a real super sport, man, they are so overblown on the internet. You get a pipe on this thing, you put a flash on it, you get that nice singing triple cylinder, the ergonomics package, the exhaust, like the whole vibe of this bike. It is a real deal super sport machine, and it's currently racing competitively in World Supersport and in national level racing. So I don't really know what else people are looking for other than those sky high RPMs. And those aren't even that important because there's other bikes that are super sports that don't rev out that high, like again the Panigales. I mean, heck, even the old Honda big V twins like the RC51, you know, those are bikes that didn't even rev that high, and nobody's saying those aren't real super sports. It's just definitely a gatekeeping kind of phenomenon that's happening with sport bike owners. But color me surprised, of course it is. Wow, look at that big ass bird. Come on, baby, come on. I was not gonna hit him, boys. I'm a lover of nature. If you've seen the YamiNoob videos, I always point out cool lizards or birds. Big fan of both. We've yet to see a snake on any of the vlogs, which is crazy given that I live in Texas and I have seen my fair share of rattlesnakes. I just have not ever been filming while it's happening. Maybe one day we'll spot one. The other really funny part, I just have to mention this towards the end in comparison to super sports. The guys that think that their R6 is gonna eat the R9 for lunch, man, you're so wrong. Pretty much everywhere a well set up R9 is gonna demolish an R6, I'm sorry to report. It just has so much more torque, and that's really what wins in racing, right? Think about off Apex, you know, at the track, on the street. You know, you can't really access that top end rev ceiling and power unless you're talking about, you know, back straight Dakota or doing a highway roll race with your buddies that you're going to get up to like a $160 or whatever. And even then, a 600 is not the optimal choice. You'd better off getting a leader bike at that point. Well, boys, since we're behind yet another construction vehicle, I think that's the sign for me to hop off on this video. Thanks so much for checking out today's upload. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If the Yamaha R9 is a real super sport, do you think that only 600s are real super sport? Why isn't this motorcycle a real super sport to you? Let me know. Love to start the conversation. And remember, this is a giveaway bike on yamadube.co, my beautiful website that I've spent lots of time and money building. So go and check it out in the link in the description below. Thanks so much for checking out today's upload. We truly do appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later.